Welcome to the fourth branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening. Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the fourth branch program. Welcome. I hope you'll have a chance to discuss with me some very important topics that have been making news this week. We begin today with War on Blacks, which is a race relation topic that we have been discussing for the past 2 to 3 months. We will also take a look at anti-Semitism, also a very hot topic in Washington, and we will look at it for what it's worth. And finally, we will discuss Judge Ellis. You may have been abreast of the fact that Judge Ellis just made a ruling in which Paul Manafort, former Trump campaign manager, got just shy of 4 years for all the bad things he has done to the country. Stay with me, we will discuss those issues in just a moment. I am MD, host of the fourth branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Stay with us. We will be right back. Welcome to the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. We begin today with the big bombshell that everybody is talking about. Manafort got just 4 years for all the bad thing that he has done to the country. Now, Manafort is not an unknown individual. He is very notorious in the political arena. There is really not too many people who don't know about Paul Manafort. Now, for the past year, he has been dragged by the special counsel, Robert Mueller, to answer for all the crimes, especially, well, all the financial crime that he was involved in for decades. Now, all that has been common knowledge. We don't know a lot of detail, but we do know enough to say that Paul Manafort is someone that should have gone to jail for the rest of his life. Yes, he is an old man, but he had committed crime that, well, no one expected him to ever walk out of a jail because of all the things he has done. And from what we have seen so far from Robert Mueller's filing, although exclusively focused on the financial aspect, this is enough for Paul Manafort to never see the light of day again. And yet, to our great, shocking surprise, Judge Ellis said, you know, the guy had made some bad decision, but besides that, he's lived a blameless life. And that's where we come in, we at the Fourth Branch. Now, what we are about to discuss, we do not have yet information and proof for what we are about to say. However, if you've been watching this program, you know that the Fourth Branch is a place for common sense. Now, we're going to rule out a few things that anybody and everybody with an average intelligence will be able to agree with us. And from that, we will try to figure out why Judge Ellis will come to that conclusion that shocked not just an individual, but that shocked everybody. Now, even to the surprise of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and even to the surprise of Paul Manafort, to the surprise of his lawyers, that was not just a Christmas gift. There is no way to describe that. But instead of just making speculation that may not have any basis, let's go to some logical exercise and try to understand what exactly was Judge Ellis smoking when he come with that ruling. Now, here is a great parallel, because sometimes when you're trying to understand something, you have to compare apple with apple, right? Because we cannot just say that blacks, because that's the conversation that I've been hearing all over the place, that there is a discrepancy between how blacks are treated in the justice system and whites. Now, it is a fair comparison. In fact, on War on Blacks, which is one of the topics we're going to talk about today, we will show this type of discrepancy in the justice system. But for now, we are going to compare apple to apple, because it's unfair that if we just take another judge, and try to compare that judge ruling in a case with Judge Ellis, then we will do a great disservice to logic. And the reason for that is because, well, as you see on the street, sometimes you see a police officer who has some level of understanding, who is able to act appropriately as a law enforcement officer. But the majority of them act as criminals with badges. Now, oh, by the way, that's the next topic. Now, Judge Ellis, in his ruling, he said that, yes, we understand that Paul Manafort has committed crime. We understand those are financial crime. And other than that, he had a blameless life. Now, we're not going to discuss that part, but it is mind-boggling that the judge, I don't know which planet Judge Ellis is living in, for him to make that statement, because he didn't have to get any document from Robert Mueller. He didn't need to get any information from anybody. He could have just Googled Paul Manafort, and he would have had uh, enough information for him to figure out who Paul Manafort really is. But he did get all those documents. He did get all the information, even the redacted part that we, the public, we cannot see. Judge Ellis is in possession of those documents. Now the picture you see on the screen, on the far left of the screen, on top, you see William Jefferson. Now, William Jefferson was a congressman from Louisiana. Now, it so happened that he was accused of something similar to Paul Manafort. He was doing money laundering, bribery. In fact, at some point, it looks like he was connected to something with the government of Nigeria. That was around 2009. Now, guess who was the judge in that case? Judge Ellis. Now, after hearing everything that really the prosecutor laid on him, Judge Ellis came to the conclusion that, well, that was serious crime. And mind you, by the way, mind you, that what William Jefferson did is nothing close to what Paul Manafort had done. And by nothing close, I mean nothing close. Money laundering is money laundering. Crime is crime. Racketeering is racketeering. But if you want to compare apple to apple, William Jefferson is a saint in comparison to Paul Manafort. But just Judge Ellis handed him 13 years in jail. Yes, you heard correctly. 13 years for doing that kind of crime. It was purely financial. Nothing else, just that, financial. And again, as I mentioned, that William Jefferson crime, which you can read about, there is plenty of documents in relation to that crime that William Jefferson committed. He spent, I believe, either 2 decades in 1 or 2 decades as a congressman. In other words, otherwise he lived a blameless life. But there is no such thing for criminals, because crime doesn't get committed overnight. It is something that you plan, that's something you worked at, that's something you recruited people for if you need other help and assistance. So in other words, by the time you committed the crime, all the things that you had to do were pre-crimes planned. There is no such thing otherwise. You live a blameless life. But get back to the story. So Judge Ellis handed William Jefferson 13 years in jail. That's why you see at the top of Judge Ellis, is he racist? Is it the reason that he saw that the crime was so egregious that he had to hand 13 years to William Jefferson? And now we move to Paul Manafort, who has had decades. We're not talking about a year or two. We're talking about decades of crime, financial, political. It's endless what Manafort has done in his political life. And what I just mentioned to you can be verified even with just a Google search. We don't need Robert Mueller to tell us who Paul Manafort is. And yet, Judge Ellis say, hey, it's just financial crime. Now, if we want to compare apple to apple, yes, it was just financial crime for William Jefferson, but he got 13 years in jail. It's just financial crime for Paul Manafort. But Judge Ellis say, hey, otherwise, he had a blameless life. Now, if we had to compare Paul Manafort and William Jefferson on the surface, William Jefferson served the United States of America. Paul Manafort served many different shady countries, dictators, authoritarian. Paul Manafort has been exactly what you would not want to be in a citizen. And yet, Judge Ellis find that he lived otherwise a blameless life. Now, why is that? The first thing I look at to understand where Judge Ellis came from is we can all agree Judge Ellis is not a stupid individual. Now, there is no if and but about that, because we know Judge Ellis is a very smart, educated person. Let's just take a quick look at Judge Ellis. Born in 1940 in Bogota, Colombia, Judge Ellis graduated from Princeton University. There, he earned a Bachelor of Science in Engineering. Then he served in the United States Navy as an aviator between 61 and 67. He earned a Juris Doctor, and listen to this, he graduated magna cum laude from Harvard Law School. This is no stupid individual. And later on, he was awarded a Knox Fellowship for study in England. He received a diploma of law in 1970. He went to practice at Hampton and Williams, and his career has been really stellar. So Judge Ellis, we can rule out, is no stupid individual. It's not one of those judges that you hear that's never practiced, someone who has no knowledge whatsoever of law and who is making decision. You have to scratch your head and say, should that person be on the bench? So we rule that out. This is not stupidity. What is it? Now, here is our theory at this point, because when we compare Judge Ellis' ruling on William Jefferson for a crime similar to Paul Manafort, but much less so, and Manafort received 3 times less than William Jefferson, we say, okay, let's suppose Judge Ellis is racist. Now, okay, now we know that blacks do indeed get harsher punishment than whites, but we are comparing apple to apple, crime, financial crime versus financial crime. And yet, even if that were to be the case, but Judge Ellis could draw from his own ruling in the past and say, oh, you know what, I cannot possibly not get close enough to what I did in the past, because it's public record. Everybody is gonna see that. So really, I have to get close to that number. Now, people came up to the conclusion that it's because Judge Ellis hates Robert Mueller. Maybe. And I kind of doubt that's the case. Yes, he had proven to be very biased since the beginning, but that's not really the point. The point is Judge Ellis made a ruling to a similar case, and he gave the defendant 13 years for crimes that far less egregious than Paul Manafort. So what is really going on? It is my theory that the President of the United States has his hand on this ruling. It is my strong opinion. Judge Ellis compromised his position in order to help the President of the United States. So what I just said, again, as I mentioned at the top of the program, I do not have at this point anything to back it up. But after I rule out everything else, that 1, Judge Ellis is not stupid. 2, he made a similar ruling that gave him a precedent so that he could have given Paul Manafort something close to what he gave to William Jefferson. And he knows that that information is public, and which means people are going to pour into his record to see how he ruled in the past. But yet, he jeopardized that to let a career criminal off the hook. So the only explanation left at this point that is logical is Judge Ellis is compromised, and we are going to investigate that to prove that Judge Ellis did not hand down that sweetheart deal ruling to Paul Manafort out of the goodness of his heart. He is highly compromised, and we will prove that it wasn't just a mistake, it was a calculated move that Judge Ellis did in order to help the President of the United States. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, inviting you to join me every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. and every weekday at 2 p.m. for discussions of social political issues and to dissect the meaning and the importance of current events, as well as to understand topics of legislations. The Fourth Branch Project is not associated with any political party, and we at the Fourth Branch do not have any political agenda or aspiration. Our ultimate objective is to work towards achieving a more perfect union by removing ignorance, the biggest obstacle to our democracy. Stay with us. We will be right back. Let's talk war on blacks. Now, if you join us for the first time, welcome. War on blacks is a topic in which we discuss race relation in America. Shortly, we will explain to you why we use the banner War on Blacks. Now, again, if you join us for the first time, welcome. We have been discussing this topic for at least the past 2 to 3 months. In other words, we have plenty of video currently archived on the People Branch YouTube channel. So if you joined for the first time, I really strongly encourage you to go to the People Branch YouTube channel and use the step given in the screen, provided on the screen, in order to get to the People Branch YouTube channel. And there you can browse for different topics. But if you want to specifically focus on the People Branch, on the race relation, you can look under race relation, institutionalized racism, and war on blacks. As I mentioned, there are plenty of other topics we also have on the People Branch YouTube channel. At least we may have 500 video currently archived in that channel. While you're there, I would strongly suggest that you also subscribe to the People Branch YouTube channel and to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter so that you can receive invites, updates, and as well to be kept abreast of activities we have with this particular program. As well, if you have some time while you're on the train or you taking a break, I would suggest you take a look at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's a website in which we have a number of articles that we publish with. There are so many different topics. There is even entertainment that you can take a break from all the bad news and read about it. You'll find it very enlightening. Now, back to our topic. Now, the banner War on Blacks was not chosen for sensationalism. If you've been watching this program, you already know that we use the banner War on Blacks in order to point to a very to a set of facts, that there have been casualties as far as blacks in our society. Now, we started the conversation by going all the way to slavery, to the period of slavery, And we left off last time at the bottom of the Civil War bridge. Now, for those of you who may not be abreast of what we're talking about, the Civil War actually was the last aspect of fight against slavery. The Union, the state that side that belonged to the Union, fought against the state, the Confederate state, the state that wanted to keep slavery in the United States, wanted to separate from the United States so that they can keep slavery around. It was mostly the state in the South, because this is where most of the slavery happened, because the South was mostly relied, their economy relied mostly on slaves, because slaves were the tools used to enrich whites, to give them the opportunity to send their kids to school, to open businesses, to buy land, to buy houses, and so on and so forth. So as far as the South was concerned, slavery ought to stay. But the Union, interestingly enough, there were a couple of states in the Union that also had slaves, but they sided with the Union to fight against slavery. Now, we left at the bottom of the Civil War bridge. Now, we were on the Civil War bridge for quite some time, and the reason we stayed there is to show you the casualties, the amount of casualty that occurred on that bridge, and all for one simple reason, that we always have in the United States of America two groups of whites: those who are racist, those who discriminate, those who cannot come to the conclusion what they're doing is wrong and it's time to stop it. And we have the other side, groups of whites who are not racist, who do not discriminate, who fight, who have been fighting for centuries now in order to try to get their colleagues, the other group, to see the light and to do the right thing. So here is the dilemma of race relation discussion in America. But in the process of that, casualties have been mounting for blacks. And those casualties, starting from the time that whites went to Africa, chased blacks, captured them, brought them here in America, and sold them around the world, there have been casualties. The number of blacks who did not make it to the destination during the slavery period ran into millions, and millions more were taken from Africa and sold across the world. And for those who managed to survive the journey, when they got to their destination, they also face other problems: health problem, adjustment to the new climate problem, and so on and so forth. So hundreds thousands of them died in the process. And slavery took hold, and during that period of time, well, thousands and thousands of them died because lack of care. Well, they were slaves, they were properties. If they're sick, in fact, if they're sick and they show any sign of not feeling well, they would be beaten, and sometimes they would die. Now, on top of all that, we're talking about being executed and hung when they try to escape slavery. So war on blacks is not sensation. It's not a banner used for sensationalism. It is a banner used in order to point to facts that blacks have been killed, have been executed from the time of slavery to today. Now, what exactly are we talking about? Now, I want to make certain that for those, because I have gotten quite an earful of people who say there is no war on blacks. Now, let me explain this particular topic. It is not a topic to discuss or to bash whites. The purpose of this discussion is not to just go and say whites are bad, whites hate blacks, and we want an end to that. As I just mentioned to you, and I've been saying it since the beginning of this program, there are two groups of whites in the country: those who are racist, who discriminate and continue to do so, and there is that other group, whites, who do not discriminate, who are racist. In fact, those whites that we're referring to on this other side of that line, they've been putting their lives on the line. In fact, if you've been watching this program, you may recall that I use example during slavery, whites who put their lives on the line, not just their lives and those of their families on the line to fight against slavery. So we know, we've been talking about that. This is not a program to just say, well, whites are bad. This is not the point of the program. As I mentioned before, we will have this program. We will continue the discussion in hope of doing two things: to eradicate racism in America, but at the very least to leave behind a country which is more integral, which is more diverse, which does not discriminate to the extent that it is here today. That is our goal, and there is absolutely nothing anyone can say or do that would put an end to that. By the way, a lot of the people that have watched this program before that do not agree with me, which I'm not expecting or I'm not asking anyone to agree, because that's not the point of the program. The point of the program is to trigger conversation in order to get to a point where we can explore solution, we can find solution, explore opportunities for solution. That's the purpose. So yes, you can disagree, but if you do not have the stomach to hear, then the program was not meant for you to begin with, because you're not going to be of any help for society in order to move this process forward. As it was in the past during slavery, there were whites who would not hear of the idea of ending slavery. Those people were not of any use, of any help for those who were trying to end slavery. The same principle holds today. If you cannot stomach the discussion, that should already be a sign that you cannot help with the movement of eradicating racism. You cannot help with you cannot help the progress of stamping out racism and discrimination in America. In other words, I would not miss you, because I got a lot of those tweets that says they block me, they're not going to follow me anymore. They try to hurt me. At some point I felt a little bit hurt, because people are trying to unfollow me because they don't like the discussion of race relation. Well, and then when the more I thought about it, the more I realized that those people were not going to be of any use to society anyway in terms of this particular discussion, because people who cannot come to do not have the average intelligence to understand that it is necessary to discuss something that's not right, that's bad, in order to shed light and come to the conclusion, here's what we can do and should do in order to end it. Now, if that is a problem, sayonara. Now, for those of you who understand that there is this problem, for those of you who want to help stamp out racism, discrimination in America, stick with me. When we come back, we will take a couple of examples and we will discuss on the other side as we continue the conversation of race relation in America. Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. The Fourth Branch program is not a feel-good venue. Now it is a place where discussion of very sensitive and sometimes controversial issues take place. Now we don't just talk for the sake of talking, and we don't just throw things out there. We use logic, common sense. Now you may not agree with us because sometimes it's an opinion that we provide that you may not like, which is fine because that's a whole point of discussion. You shed light, you see things one way, I see things another way, and then we can hash it out and find some way to solve the problem. But if you cannot stand it, it's obvious that we may not have anything further to talk about. Now, war on blacks, race relation. We mentioned before that there are two aspects to race relation. There is the individual aspect and there is the system aspect. Now, the individual aspect is, for instance, that my neighbor next door may not like me because I'm black. I don't care. I couldn't care less that my neighbor doesn't like me. It doesn't change anything about me. It doesn't make me any less smart. It doesn't make me any sicker. It doesn't change anything about me because I still stay the same person. The person I meet on the street, on the train, at the workplace, none of that matters because it's preferences. Because if you don't like blacks, who am I to tell you you should? But what is of concern with this program is the following: what we call institutionalized racism. Now, what is it? Now, racism, if we ought to define that for you, is a behavior, is language, is action used by one individual towards another, which is based exclusively on external factors. For instance, skin color. That's all it is. Because the individual who expresses a sentiment, negative sentiments towards another individual based on external factors, does not know anything about the person they hate. Absolutely nothing. So that's why it doesn't bother me. But what this program is about is, or what this program is for, is to combat, to fight institutionalized racism. We mentioned earlier that a lot of people took Judge Ellis' ruling and tried to compare with other ruling in the justice system towards blacks. Now, which is true, there is no shock here in our country for this type of problem. It is what falls under institutionalized racism. So, institutionalized racism is a system which nurtures, which condones, or even promotes racist behavior, language, and actions. Again, institutionalized racism is a system which nurtures, condones, or even promotes racist behavior, language, and action. What does that mean in English? Well, let's take a very interesting example we have been using, and we'll try to illustrate, to demonstrate that very aspect. And by the way, before I forget this very good piece of information, we will begin to introduce this another interesting topic that's related to war on blacks, called the prison industry. The prison industry, which is a topic that we will, a subtopic if you like, we will discuss in this venue shortly. So again, that's another good reason to subscribe to the channel and to follow me on Twitter, so that when we have new program, we can alert you as to search, and if you're interested, you can watch those programs. Now, you may remember that 2-3 months ago, Mitch McConnell tried to push to the federal bench someone by the name of Thomas Farr. He is a judge in North Carolina. Now, Thomas Farr is openly racist. He had waged a war against blacks in North Carolina, especially on matter of voting. This is not any shocking surprise for anyone, especially people who live in North Carolina, and much less so for Mitch McConnell. Now, that name was, Thomas Farr was selected by Donald Trump to be put on the federal bench. Now, Mitch McConnell tried everything humanly possible to put Thomas Farr on the federal bench. Keep in mind, Mitch McConnell is well aware of Thomas Farr's background, is well aware of all the things, the negative thing he has done towards blacks. Mitch McConnell is well aware that, well, Thomas Farr does not hide where he stands when it comes to blacks. And yet, when people say that Republicans are overwhelmingly racist, now sometimes it's difficult, especially racism is not an easy thing to point to. But what we have been doing here in this program is point to the action. Remember, I just described to you what institutionalized racism is? It's a system which condones, which nurtures, and even promotes racist behavior, actions, and language. Now, here's an action by people who are racist. Now, anybody can tell you, I'm not racist. Anybody can say that. Even the racist can tell you he's not racist. Even the openly racist individuals say, I'm no racist person. But let's watch what a racist individual does. Now, Mitch McConnell would dance on his head and say, I'm no racist individual. I have black friends. I hire black people. You cannot call me a racist. But let's look at the action, shall we? Now, when Mitch McConnell, which as a leader in the Senate, you expect the individual who leads makes the decision of presenting or not presenting an individual based on the information you have on the individual. That's the way it works. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. And Mitch McConnell, of all people, know that. So he has information about Thomas Farr as being openly racist. He brought it, well, he was going to bring it to the floor for a vote. Well, actually, he did, didn't he? Guess what? All the Republican senators, except 2, voted to confirm Thomas Farr. Now, those 2 people who didn't vote, one, I can expect that person not to have voted for Thomas Farr, but the other individual who didn't vote for him, I'm not sure whether he's racist or not. Now, here's the story. The 2 people that did not vote were Jeff Flake and Tim Scott. Jeff Flake, of former senator from Arizona, and Tim Scott, who is a senator in South Carolina. Now, why did those 2 people not vote for Thomas Farr? Jeff Flake, the reason I cannot tell you if Jeff Flake is racist or not is because Jeff Flake did put something on the table for Mitch McConnell to work on. He said unless and until Mitch McConnell put a resolution on the floor to protect Robert Mueller, he was not going to vote for anyone that they bring to the floor. He would not, the Republican would not get his vote. So Jeff Flake did not vote for Thomas Farr because that condition wasn't met by Mitch McConnell. Now, Tim Scott is the black senator from South Carolina, next door to North. So he knows the story of Thomas Farr. So that was expected that he wasn't going to vote for Thomas Farr. And by the way, it didn't matter to Mitch McConnell because had Jeff Flake voted for Thomas Farr, Tim Scott's vote would not have counted anyway. It wouldn't have mattered. So Mitch McConnell was pushing forward to put on the federal bench an openly racist individual. That's how institutionalized racism works, because he was practicing it on the local, at the local level in North Carolina. Now you put him on the federal bench, the sky is the limit. That's how institutionalized racism works. Mitch McConnell could say, I'm not a racist, but if you are supporting racist and you are working to put racists on the bench, you are by definition a racist individual, because all you're doing is helping to perpetualize racism in America. You can spin it however you want, but in order to get rid of something, you have to get rid of that thing. Because if you continue to put in place individuals who are racist, we're not talking about individuals who are hiding being racist. We're talking about individuals who are openly racist, and yet you go along with it and you say, let's just put another such individual on the bench. All you're doing is helping to perpetualize racism in America. So we're not watching and we're thinking, let's watch for the white nationalists on the street. Let's watch for the white supremacists on the street. Let's watch for the KKK. As I mentioned before in this program, those people are not our problem. Those people are not our problem when it comes to racism in America, because they open and we know who they are, and they are very small in numbers. They're not our problem. Institutionalized racism is not caused by those individuals. Is the kind of action that I just mentioned to you, that people in position of power, such as Mitch McConnell, those are the kind of things that are happening across the nation, both federal and at the state level, that help to perpetualize racism in America. Because if Mitch McConnell wanted to help getting rid of racism, the minute he gets the name of that person, he said to the president, you know what? Nope, I'm not going to put that person on the for a vote, because that person is openly racist, and we are working to end racism in America. Nope, that's not what he did. He brought it to the floor and trying to force everybody, including Jeff Flake, to vote for that individual. That's how institutionalized racism works. And Mitch McConnell is a tool that's been used in Washington to help keep racism alive in America. Watch the legislation that are passed, how detrimental they are to minorities in general, blacks in particular. That's how institutionalized racism works. What happened beyond the Civil War breach? You know, blacks were freed. Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Act and say, no more slavery. Blacks freed. There was celebration. There were cheering. And then, what happened? Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. One of the the factors that we found out that contributes greatly to the kind of social issues we have here in the United States of America is ignorance. And mostly in most you would find out in most announcement, that's one of the things that we mention over and over and over and over, and it is indeed true. Now, all men are born ignorant. There is no if and but about that. All men are born ignorant, but unfortunately only a few of them recognize the problem. They decide to do something about it, but for reason that boggles the mind, most people seems to enjoy, for lack of a better word, seems to enjoy living in ignorance. And I will show and explain shortly what I mean by that. Now, I'm sure that there are many factors. I'm no psychologist, and I will not try to dissect really what's going on in individuals' mind, but what we have observed, at least in the past few decades, there has been a campaign, and that campaign benefits a group. That the campaign we're referring to is a campaign to promote ignorance. No, I'm not kidding, I'm not joking. It is a campaign to promote ignorance because it serves a purpose for a group. And we're going to show you exactly what we mean. Now, in a society where people understand that everyone matters, where people understand that we all on the same boat, that's the boat we call the United States of America, you'd think that those who are in position of power, those who have a little bit of knowledge, those who understand, would work towards helping people come out of ignorance because it's good for the country. The United States of America has schools everywhere, some of the best universities, and we parents, we try everything possible to make certain that our kids, our children, go to school, go to college, learn, because we don't want them to stay ignorant. And yet, because ignorance benefits a group, and by a group I don't mean just a small number of people, ignorance helps to enrich a group. Ignorance helps others, another subdivision of that group, to keep their jobs, and for that reason they have promoted ignorance. They stick to it. In fact, they okay with people becoming dumber and dumber and dumber. Now, I mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, in case you haven't caught up yet as to what I'm referring to. There is a campaign in the Republican Party by leaders to make certain that their constituents stay ignorant. And I don't mean that as just a statement, because there are examples that we will provide you that show that they do that on purpose, deliberately, in order to make certain that their constituents stay ignorant. Now that's the politician. But there is another group which benefit tremendously financially from the Republicans' ignorance, and they do everything possible to make certain that Republicans stay in ignorance because it benefits them greatly. Now, here's the kicker. Well, before I go to the kicker part, let me go into an announcement.
In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies presented to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore.
Yes, I said earlier that the Republican leaders and organizations such as Fox, they have worked overtime to make certain that Republicans stay ignorant. And this is deliberate. It's not an accident. And we can give you example after example of such. Remember Obamacare? That's going to kill grandma, that's going to kill job, and so on. Now, it is a past example. I used that before. Again, I'm going to strongly suggest you take a look at the People Branch YouTube channel, because those discussions are archived in that channel and you can browse and listen to them, because today we want to get to the other topic that we mentioned earlier, which is anti-Semitism. But for sake of brevity, we're going to mention that during the time that Republicans were making the argument that Obamacare is a death panel, there was no, they knew what they were saying was wrong. They knew it wasn't true. When they say that Obamacare is going to kill jobs, they knew what they were saying was wrong, because they had the whole piece of legislation in their hand. They could dissect it, they can read, and they also have other organizations that provided information to supplement that particular legislation act, and for them to be able, because that's what those legislators do, that they dissect and they try to get to the bottom of what the other side is trying to propose. But instead of discussing it in its merit, what they did is they lied to their constituent, deliberately lied to their constituent, because guess what it does? It rallies support for their cause, for their agenda. Now, it may sound like a small thing. Of course, we call it politics, but this is not politics. When you deceive someone, you cannot call that politics. And I already gave you example of what politics looks like. And we'll talk about that at some other time. But now let's talk about anti-Semitism, because it's important to address this topic. It is a topic that, if you remember, it was brought in by none other than Ilhan Omar. Now, Ilhan Omar is a newly minted congresswoman out of Minnesota. She represents the 5th district in the state of Minnesota. She's newly minted. She's been in Washington for, what is it, 2-3 months now? Because it started in January. We just started March. March just started, rather. So she's been there just for 2 months. Henry Olsen of Washington Post wrote an article and say Ilhan Omar is the Steve King of the left. I did take offense to that, and I, of course, wrote a rebuttal to that article and say Ilhan Omar is no Steve King. Now, Steve King has been in Washington since 2003. Not until January of 2019, Henry Olsen never had any problem with all the hatred, all the racist language that Steve King had. Henry Olsen never had a problem with that. And then all of a sudden, he's an individual who's been in Washington for barely 2 months, and she's suddenly the Steve King of the left. The hypocrisy in the Republican Party. Now, I'm not here to defend Mrs. Omar or to condemn Mrs. Omar. In fact, I'm here for a very different reason. But I had to make that point because it seems almost as if Republicans have no filter when it comes to doing harm to minority. But whenever, and they're always looking for an opportunity that something happened with a minority for them to try to hang the individual, just like it was during the slavery. Anything that a minority does is looked through the prism that you deserve to be hung. And the only thing I can think of when Henry Olsen wrote that article is, well, maybe he's a descendant of one of those slave owners, because that was their reaction to mostly any black who tried to escape. The minute that they capture that effing black, and he will be hung or executed. And he was Henry Olsen, who did not hesitate for a minority who's been there for just 2 months, which I'm sure that we're not gonna touch yet about what she said, but let's assume for sake of argument what she said is bad, now is racist. Now Henry Olsen did not have the patience to wait. 2 months is too long, and yet for a decade, over a decade, we as a country listen to Steve King spewing hatred language towards minority, towards black. Hey, that was okay. He's a white man. He's entitled to. Now that aside, Mrs. Omar was involved in discussion. Of course, as a congresswoman, you are involved in debate about different topics. But it so happened that the discussion that was ongoing had to do with none other than the state of Israel. And as a Muslim woman, she has her own understanding of Israel, rightfully so, because we American, we live in our cocoon and we make decisions that impacts, that affects other nations, other people, and we think those decisions are the best decision, and it doesn't matter who we impact as long as it meets the criteria, as long as we satisfy with it because it fits our policy. The hell with everybody else. Now, for those of you who do not understand where Mrs. Omar comes from, and let me quickly say that I'm not here to defend Mrs. Omar's comment, and I'm not here to condemn Mrs. Omar's comment. All I'm here to do is to put any sentiment that Mrs. Omar has in context. So the rest is up to you. So Mrs. Omar, being a Muslim woman, or at least descendant of, she's from Somalia if I'm not mistaken, or at least she's a descendant of Somalia. Now Mrs. Omar being Muslim, so it's pretty certain that she follows what's going on in the Middle East. Just like any other congressman or congresswoman who comes from a different part of the world, like for instance Marco Rubio, who follows what happened in Cuba. So there's nothing wrong with that. So if you are a descendant of another country, then you tend to follow what's going on in that part of the world. And you are more sensitive to it too. You may recall that Marco Rubio was very much against Obama going to Cuba, trying to reestablish relationship with the island. Now let's remove Cuba and substitute it with the Palestine. It's no longer Marco Rubio, it's Ilhan Omar. In other words, Ilhan Omar is very sensitive to this type of conversation when it comes to Israel. And the reason for that, for those of you who don't know, Israel has committed its shares of atrocity, war crime against Palestine. And this is not this is not speculation. This is not assumption. This is facts. In fact, in 2015, I wrote an article which is titled "Flashing the Anti-Semitism Card." And the reason I wrote the article is because you may not necessarily recall, but in the summer of 2014, there was a fight between Israel and not even the Palestine, but the fighters in the Palestine. And Israel, with his war machine, went into Palestine and they bombed a civilian location. Now you could say it was just war, then that can happen. Hold your horses. Israel did bomb the civilian location knowingly. And by knowingly, I mean you know that it is a civilian location. And how can I possibly know that? It's because it is recorded that UN at that time, which had crews on the ground, warned Israel not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not 5 times, 18 times. Told Israel 18 times that that location, we have civilian in that location. 18 times. It was no mistake. Israel bombed the place anyway. And tons of children and women were killed. When Israel was called in to answer for its crime, it was shielded by the United States of America not to answer to the crime. Now, we're not even touching about all the grabbing of the land that belongs to the Palestine, because we're way beyond that problem. And we will bring that to you in subsequent conversation about Israel, because it's worth talking about those things today, since this conversation is heated in Washington. Now, the scenario that I just gave you, it's not an isolated scenario, because Israel has been doing that over many decades now, since its existence, as a matter of fact. You want to know the more recent one? In 2018, Israel killed 38 actually civilian. 35 of them, or the other way around, 135, 38 of them were children, knowingly. It is a pattern that Israel has used to decimate the Palestinian people. And every time Israel is called to answer its crime, guess what happened? They flash the anti-Semitism card, because the reason Israel is being called to answer for its crime is because, ta-da! People are anti-Semitic. That's the reason in 2015 I wrote the article flashing the anti-Semitism card, because for some reason here in the United States of America, we too come to Israel's rescue and always defend Israel, because hey, anybody that judges Israel for its crime, anybody that try to expose Israel for its crime is anti-Semitic. In other words, there cannot be any conversation about Israel unless it is flattery, unless it is positive. Then all conversation about Israel is out of question. As such, Mrs. Omar found herself in hot water, because everybody here in America believes that the only conversation we ought to have about Israel has to be positive, and you cannot expect Mrs. Omar to feel that way. Now, I am highly glad and excited that at least there is another voice in Congress that can point to those problems, because for so long we here in the United States have turned eyes the other way, have supported Israel, have literally helped Israel commit crimes in the Middle East and not answer for the crimes. Now, let's talk anti-Semitism. What did Mrs. Omar say that is construed as anti-Semitic? According to a report, this was part of a thread of conversation between Mrs. Omar and a conversation that started with Glenn Greenwald, if I'm not mistaken, a journalist that bring the conversation about support for Israel. And here is what Mrs. Omar answered. I should not be expected to have allegiance or to pledge support to a foreign country in order to serve my country in Congress or serve on the committee, which she served on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and all the Republicans were all of a sudden so sensitive about racism. They don't want Mrs. Omar to be on Foreign Affairs Committee because she is a racist. Because you know what? They just made the decision to kick Steve King out of all committees. But they forgot that they tolerated Steve King for well over a decade doing exactly that. Now, is there something here that you read that sound anti-Semitic? what Mrs. Omar was saying, because although she didn't mention Israel, but what she was alluding to is the fact that she was being pressured to support whatever was a conversation about Israel. And she said, no, my allegiance is to the United States of America, not to Israel. Last time I looked, I didn't see Israel a state in the United States map. But most importantly, guess what? As the conversation evolved, she says something to the effect, it's about the Benjamin. And all hell broke loose. Mrs. Omar is anti-Semitic. Is she? Now, nobody can ignore the fact that in Washington, we have lobbies of all groups, all kind of lobbies that also include Jewish organization. Now, we can talk about all lobbying group except Jewish organization, because if you do, suddenly it is, drumroll, anti-Semitic. Now, what is exactly anti-Semitic? Now, the word itself simply means hatred for the Jews. That's what the word means. And it stems from the fact that the Holocaust cost 6 million lives to Jews. Understandably so, the Jews would be very sensitive to any conversation, anti-Semitic conversation. Nobody is saying that it's okay for anyone to be anti-Semitic. Nobody is saying that people should tolerate anti-Semitism. But where were they for over a decade when Steve King was spewing hatred languages in Washington? Why weren't they outraged? But more to the point, did Mrs. Omar say something or send a tweet that was anti-Semitic? Now, I am not a Jew, obviously, that I cannot relate to the fact that there can be words that would evoke anti-Semitic sentiment. I understand that because as a black, it's very easy for me when someone is speaking to see the code, even if they're not overtly racist, but there can be a code that clearly tell you that this person just practicing subtle racism. Now, I understand all that, but I do need to understand what is anti-Semitic for the United States. That someone judges Israel for its atrocities, someone criticizes Jews for being so genocidal towards the Palestinian? Is that anti-Semitic? Because I would be among those who have used anti-Semitic language. And the reason is because obviously I wrote about all those atrocities that Israel has committed over the decades, over many decades. So what is anti-Semitic? And that's a conversation we will continue to have as we explore why here in the United States we condone Israel crimes, Israel wrongdoing towards the Palestinian, and at the same time we're crying anti-Semitic whenever someone points those wrongdoings, those crimes out. We'll be right back.
After reading several books based on presidents and on Obama specifically, I found that they're typically partisan. The Obama legacy targets the heart of the issue by giving credit to the president where it's due, but definitely coming down hard on Obama on his bigger failures, like his handling of the Syrian crisis.
If you are in college, going to college, you are an educator, a faculty member, or someone with interest in government or politics, The Obama Legacy is definitely a book to read.
My professor recommended The Obama Legacy.
A friend actually recommended The Obama Legacy.
I would highly recommend this book for anyone, whether for academic use or leisure reading.
I would recommend this book to anyone out there searching for an impartial and unbiased look into Barack Obama's tenure as president.
I would definitely recommend this book as a good read for both liberals and conservatives.
I thank you to have taken the time to watch this program. I hope it was informative. Please write to us, let us know how we're doing. Send us comments, criticism, suggestions. And should you have a topic you would like us to talk about, please let us know as well. We will research the topic and we will debate it right here on the fourth branch, the place for common sense. I hope you visit the People Branch YouTube channel for more information about this program and other topics. You have a wonderful weekend. The Fourth Branch Podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.
Screaming out, stop snitching. What if Adam and Eve ain't eat the fruit? You think we'd be able to see the truth? Or what if Albert Einstein ain't think of the nuke? Or Smith & Wesson ain't teach us to shoot? You think there'd be as many plays out there if there was no boost? Matter of fact, what if white man hung off a noose? Would it still be cool to say nigga? Or maybe we would make six figures? Or would we wanna be crackers? And all the whites would be rappers? What if Martin Luther King survived? You think the New Orleans flood would've caused him to drop and die? I wonder what if and see what is. Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? If Christopher Wallace never got murked, How much money would Sean Carter be worth? What if Tupac never got hit with the flame? Would the game still have change filled with these lames? What if Jabari wasn't speeding down the street? What if the bullet Malcolm sent never hit Zeke? A black guy dropped off at the house instead of the stop. Or Ali never got bopped by the cops. What if the little homie Easy didn't die? Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on?